Everyone, and welcome to today's workshop on self-care part 4 with Lisa Saremi. My name is Nicole, and I'm on the Access Elite team that's brought this event to you today. For those of you who might not be familiar, Access Elite is a health and wellness company. We provide on-demand wellness content and facilitate live virtual events. We're so excited to bring some positivity and connection to your day, so I just want to take a moment and thank you for joining in. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today. Lisa is a transformational coach, a marriage and family therapist, and a yoga therapist. And with that, let's get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm so excited that we're wrapping up our self-care series today, but most excited because in today's session, we're going to actually work on developing our own personal self-care plan. So if you don't already have some pen and paper or maybe a screen up that you can do some note taking on, please do that now so you can get the most out of your time. So it's the fourth of a 4-part series that we have been working on self-care, defining it, and actually there's a little bit of an outline for today, but we've been defining it. We're going to do some review. So if you weren't with us in those first 4 series, we'll do a quick review, and then I think that these will be available recorded later, and Nicole will tell you more about that at the end of the session. And then today's going to be a little interactive, so I want to open it up for questions and comments. I want to spend a little time where we can all fill out a self-care plan and template, creating one for ourselves. And even if we're not able to finish it today, maybe it's something we can come back to. And then leaving space to make declarations and to really share, because it's such a powerful piece of really manifesting and bringing things into our reality. So how this series started was we really just took a look at, well, what is stress? Because actually how it started is we were really looking at what is self-care? What is sacred self-care? And what it came to was that really, if we were to look at how do we integrate that practice of self-care into our daily lives, what are we really doing? And it's really regulating our stress. And so what is stress? Stress is when our body is responding to danger, to harmful situations. And the thing is, they can either be perceived or they can actually be happening. And then the biological response that occurs in our body does things to prepare us to meet the stress. But when we get chronically stressed, we can get stuck in those modes. And that's not always serving us at all. We can experience stress from very different fields of our experience as a human being. So we might feel it physical stress, whether it's working out really hard or getting in an accident or eating foods that make it harder for our body to stay in balance. And then, of course, when those things happen, those things that happen to our physical body might create more stress from our mind or emotional body. And then sometimes the stress comes in from our mind or emotional body, and then it ends up manifesting in our physical body. And then, of course, there's this part of us that we can't really see, but we can feel, and it holds our connection to our existence, really. And so then that piece of us can also get stressed out. And when that part of us, that existential part of us or spiritual part of us gets stressed out, of course, it's going to have a ripple effect in the other aspects and layers that make up who we are. So our self-care plan becomes really like, how do I keep balance in my life? How do I manage the stress so that I can stay connected in my heart and in my heart's consciousness, which is one of more compassion and self-love. So as I mentioned briefly, stress affects our physical body, mental, emotional, and spiritual. But when we experience stress, the impact it has on our physical bodies, there are a release of hormones. And so when those hormones get released, it affects every system in the body. It increases breathing. I mean, just think about like if you go for a hard run, or you just do anything that starts to get your heart rate going, it's increased stress on the body. And then the breathing increases, the heart rate increases, it goes faster. When you're going for a big run, your stomach is not digesting your meal, right? So when we work out, usually we're not working out right after we have a big meal because of what happens to the body. There's something that happens in our biology on all these different levels as a way to respond to the stress. And the challenge that many of us have today is the stress is chronic. And because it's chronic and because we're not balancing it out, we're really taking a toll on our entire well-being and health. And then we also got into, so we talked about all that. And then last session, we got into some of the layers of that experience of who we are that really are not touchable or seeable. And we looked through the lens of ancient yogic wisdom. We looked at the koshas. The koshas are the 5 layers of our consciousness. And it starts with the physical body, it goes to the breath body, and then it keeps going out to the emotional body, the intellectual body, and the bliss body. And so each one of these layers give us access to experiencing ourselves in a different way, and also inquiring where do we need to make adjusting to bring a little balance back in, right? So if you're starting to feel very stressed out in your life, you might notice that sometimes that intellectual body, the Vigmaya kosha, it starts to get stressed, and that stress starts to get more intense, and then it starts to turn into emotion, and then it starts to affect our breath, and the next thing you know, it manifests in your physical body. So these different layers, the more we can become aware and connected to them and they're living in us and through us, we can tend to them so that prior to it actually manifesting in physical disease, maybe we can tend to those imbalances. And that's why the self-care is so important. So I want you to think about all of these things when we work on that self-care plan. We also last session went over the chakras, which I really like to call these centers of consciousness. And each one of these centers that are being represented in the ancient yogic wisdom, they run them up and down the spine. The Sushumna is what they call it. And each one of these energy centers represent not only a different part of ourselves, but a different part of our lives. And there's so much wisdom in the chakras. I did a whole series with Access Elite on them. Make sure to check it out. But they help inform us. So think of all of these things that I just went over as roadmaps to help us really get to the truth about what we need for balance, right? What we need for self-care. So we also went through the session before different ideas of what we could do for self-care. And so I just wanted to kind of go through this list. There's a God, wish, or worry box. That's a box that like basically you can just give things away to that either you want the energy of something that you want, or the energy of something that like you don't want to worry about anymore and you want to give it away. Another type of self-care practice could be literally scheduling time to worry. I did a lot of work with hospice, and one of the things I would do with my clients is I would have them schedule time to grieve and actually create a whole environment and a container to be able to do that. So schedule the time, but don't have it in your space all day, all night, you know? Another type of self-care might be, you know, expanding your interests through a new hobby. There's always the impact of what we're putting into our body. And a lot of times we can get kind of hooked on the caffeine, right? Because it gets us going. Another type of self-care, one of my favorite, is to completely unplug from technology. Leave your phone at home, leave all of the pings and the dings and the bings, and then go get barefoot and put your feet on the sand or on the earth. Retreat. Now, a retreat could be a week long in a different country. It could be a day long down the street. It could be 5 minutes in the bathroom or in your car. So finding time for retreat. Engaging with a therapist, a healer, or a coach. Really just making that simple investment in ourselves and allocating that time for us, for our evolution, just like being here is an act of self-care. These are just ways that we can make sure that we're keeping ourselves balanced on all levels. For some of us, meditation is going to be a really powerful self-care practice, or prayer, self-massage, or a massage. Taking a day to make it like a spa day. Maybe self-care is just listening to an uplifting podcast while you're on a drive or at home. Making your bed, changing your sheets, making sure you're getting enough sleep is a huge act of self-care. What are the things that we're doing to support our bodies to take on stress? And how can we, by doing more to do self-care, we can almost expand that window of tolerance for stress. Rituals, a very powerful way. We already have rituals. So I would almost say bringing consciousness to the rituals that we are already engaging in, and then maybe creating new rituals that would be representing acts of self-care and self-love. Creating structures to support our self-care. So, for example, I literally will go, there's not right now with COVID, there's not a lot of places I can go do yoga. And for me, yoga is a practice of self-care. However, to make sure that I go and that I don't talk myself out of it, I actually pre-register for the classes. I know that there's a fee if I cancel. I know that I have to show up. And it just kind of creates that structure for my self-care. Journaling. Singing. For some of us, singing is not going to feel like self-care. For others, like maybe just in the shower or just using your voice in a way could really feel good and could open up that space for your expression. Dance. Practicing compassion, always starting with the self. Practicing forgiveness, starting with the self. Practicing gratitude, starting with the self. Practicing being an expression of love, starting with the self. And the reason why I wanted to just say, so these are all just practices. So it's like, okay, how could I practice compassion today? And what would be a compassionate thing I could do for myself today? And then from that compassion for ourselves or other beings, they don't even have to be people, right? They could be animals, they could be a plant. Then how can I keep the presence of that alive? Another one of my favorites is, because I'm a yes girl, is saying no. So if you're a yes, yes, yes person and you're always saying yes, just learning to say no and checking in before you say yes could be an act of self-care. And then boundaries, like, when we understand ourselves as energetic beings and we look at those koshas and we look at the chakras and we really start to feel into what that means for ourselves, we realize that it's really important that we have healthy boundaries and that we're protecting those sacred spaces that are ours. Collaging, I love working with image. So what collaging is literally just working with image, grabbing magazines or going on Google and finding images that are an expression of maybe something that you are trying to create in your life, that embody a feeling that you'd like, or just helping you transmute something that might be going on in your life. Self-care is also spending time with people you care about. We did a whole burnout series, and one of the things that happens when we're on our way to burnout is all those basic needs that we have as humans that entail keeping us feeling like balanced, they start to get ignored and they start to get pushed to the side, and we can even begin to isolate, right? So just spending time with people that we care about, being in communication, asking ourselves new questions like, what do I need today? What do I need right now? Really listening. And just by asking that question, you're creating a space for yourself to be heard. Maybe tending to a plant or a garden, planning a getaway, alone time, that retreat we were talking about. If you like to cook, cooking a meal that you love. If you like to eat, eating a meal that you love. Cleaning your space so that the space that you're in is a reflection of your inner space. Leading with intention. So when you meet each moment, you have some intention behind your presence in that moment. Maintaining healthy relationships outside of work. Maybe drinking some herbal tea or doing a little spa day at home, putting on a face mask and maybe listening to some sound, taking a hot bath or a sauna, getting a manicure or a pedicure, going shopping if that's your thing, and treating yourself to something nice. Maybe it's just moving your body, right? Just doing some basic movements with your body and finding gratitude that you can. Spending some time with your breath. These days you can buy these blankets. They're weighted blankets and they're very calming. So like you could lay down and place a weighted blanket on top of you and just be. Or maybe you have a pet that helps regulate you. Writing yourself a love letter, acknowledging yourself for all the things that you feel you'd like to be acknowledged for. Get synced up with the natural cycles of our planet, the cycles of the moon, the cycles of the day, the cycles of the season, and really see how they're living inside of you. Sometimes it's as simple as calling a friend, smudging your space, so using a little sage or Palo Santo and just clearing your space with intention, or using some guidance cards maybe if that's what speaks to you. Surrounding yourself by positivity, positive affirmations, positive things that you're listening to, positive books. Like, we have a negativity bias. So anything that we can do to help us see the positive possibilities and perspectives are an act of self-care. And then, as I mentioned with stress, whether it's something we're imagining or it's actually happening, we experience stress. So the cool thing is we can actually use our imagination and we can use guided imagery to take ourselves places that also create the opposite. And literally just by scanning the body, if you were to just be seated or lie down and just scan from the crown to one side and then the other side of your body. So like left ear, left nostril, right nostril, left eyeball, right eyeball, left jawline, right jawline, and then all the way down, you're going to find that that's going to calm your nervous system. So you might just take a moment right now and reflect on some things that might be an expression of self-care for you. Jot them down. You know, sometimes when I work with people, what I like to encourage people to do is really first allow yourself to put everything down. Don't get into that place where immediately you go, okay, well, let's say you wanted to do self-massage. Well, I don't have time. Let's say you wanted to go take a yoga class or try that. Well, I can't do that. None of the studios around me are open. You know, like first make it your wish list and bring your believer with you so that you could just put anything down. Anything is possible. And then later you can actually come back to reality and you can check into your schedule and your flow and your willingness and your budget and your resources, you know, to see, okay, what can I actually implement as a self-care plan? So the self-care worksheet becomes the list. And then what we want to do is we want to kind of sort through that list, as I was saying. And, you know, there's different ways that we could look at self-care. In fact, I invite you to look at it in different timelines. So, okay, daily. What are some things I can do daily that would be an act of self-care? And if you have some limited resources, let's say like back to that yoga experience or something, maybe you can just do a little practice at your house, if that's your thing, or a little breath work right when you roll out of bed. But looking at the daily things, maybe it's sitting down and writing down 10 things that you're grateful for today before you go to sleep, or when you wake up, or both. Maybe it's working with that God box. Maybe it's drawing cards. Maybe it's praying. Like that becomes your daily checklist, right? And it's like a commitment. It's like this sacred space that you're creating for yourself, to yourself. And then sometimes it's nice to get other people involved because it creates that accountability. And there might be other people around you that also could use a little more self-care themselves. So to come together and to be counting on each other to show up for yourselves can create a little more of a structure there. And then also, maybe there's something you want to do weekly. Like maybe weekly you want to go on a hike, or weekly there's a particular friend that you want to see, or there's something that you want to do that would really tend to those deeper parts of yourself that would really feel like they fill you up rather than they take, and minimize the stress. And then there might be something that you want to do monthly or quarterly. You know, maybe you're a business owner and you want to take a weekend once a quarter where you can go and just evaluate where you're at, where your goals are, where you've been, right? There's so many ways that we can find ways to practice self-care. But what's important is if we just think about it, if it's just thoughts that we have up there somewhere one day, someday, they don't really happen, right? But if we sit down and we start to define, what can I do daily? And then we begin to notice, like, what if you're only getting 6 hours of sleep right now on a regular basis? And we know that 8 hours is like so important. Maybe you're able to just start to inch your way, right? To 7 hours. Like you're going to start to do little things to try to make sure you get 7 hours of sleep every night. And then looking at the weekly and the monthly. Now, these things become your lifestyle. These things become your habits. And so another thing that's really nice is a habit tracker. You can create, like on a calendar, like you can either print it out from your computer or actually get a physical calendar. And then let's say you're trying to let go of certain habits or create new habits. It takes about 21 days, right? So we can just start to track it on the calendar, and we can start to move towards positive change and positive progress, doing things that are more in honor and in care of ourselves and our bodies and our minds and our hearts and our spiritual selves, so that we feel more balanced and we feel more able and capable to be more expansive and to really show up for all those things that feel important. So words have power, and you know, many of you may not have written out your self-care plan yet or anything like that, but I know that several of you have also been with us through the whole series. So I want to just kind of open it up, give people an opportunity to either ask questions or make declarations, because it's in the listening of others that we really exist, right? So just by saying, like, you know, what I've realized is, you know, I'm just going to make better choices when it comes to food. I am eliminating cheese. Maybe that's your active self-care. Maybe it's something else, but I just really want to open up the space and give people an opportunity to share anything, if there's anything that you would like to share about an action that you see now to take?
Yeah, I would love to share a self-care act that I've been practicing since starting this series with you, Lisa. Um, Mine has been meditation. I have always been involved in yoga, but I've always done the physical side of it and not really the mental side of it. And so I've been trying to set a goal to give myself at least 10 minutes before I even let my feet touch the ground out of my bed to kind of sink into my meditation. And then when I put my feet on the ground, it's almost like this grounding act for me. And I kind of just remind myself that I'm present and I'm there and I'm ready to take on the day. And then I take my first step into the day.
I love that. And what have you found it's provided you just in doing that?
It's definitely just brought me into a more conscious space first thing in the morning rather than getting distracted by all of my to-dos and my roommates. I have a moment to myself and I can kind of go on in a more mindful manner in my morning. So I've definitely noticed a difference.
Beautiful. I love it. Very well said.
And
Anyone else?
it looks like we do have a question in the chat as
Oh,
well.
okay, I see it. Any rituals or any advice for self-forgiveness and guilt? That might be a good, that's such a big question, Kyoko. She's always got big questions.
I thought you already know this. It's a big question.
Well, it's a big question because there's so many, like I would want to go deeper a little bit but on a high level response to that, any ritual. So when I think about the cycles of the moon, for example, right, the full moon represents something at its peak and it's about like releasing, and the new moon, which is coming up actually this Thursday, is really about planting new seeds, right? But there's this continual cycle, if you can think about it, of birth, death, rebirth. Now, you're probably like, well, what does that have to do with self-forgiveness and guilt? Well, what I was going to say is the ritual when you're releasing something, and I would think like if you're talking about guilt, right, it would be a releasing. I would say the first thing, maybe just taking pen to paper and identifying the things that are there that you feel guilty about or that you're holding on to, the things you're holding on to and that aren't like getting you more connected to a lot, that are stressing you out. I can almost see my shoulders went up, right? The things that, because guilt is a stressful feeling, right? Putting those on paper and then doing a ritual. So maybe lining up with the moon cycle, or even just taking that piece of paper and burning it or giving it to Mother Ocean, this giving it away, giving that guilt away. And then the forgiveness is, the right away download I got was like writing yourself a letter, like almost like that person, you're writing it to the other, but you're actually writing it to yourself, forgiving yourself for whatever it is that you're holding on, the guilt, maybe shame. The reason why I said it was a big question, Kyoko, is because it's like a big ball of yarn. It could be like a big ball of yarn. And because the forgiveness and the guilt can also have other things there like shame. And so there might be just some layers to metabolize. So it might not just happen in your first ritual. Just be patient and keep metabolizing the releasing that needs to be released so you can get to love.
How do you know when it released? May not see the completely released, but how do you know? Like I was focusing on the purification, kind of the ritual things, and then one day I noticed, oh, maybe it's already purified, but I'm still on keep on purifying, and then my mentally thinks that, oh, I need to purify this guilt or this forgiveness. So how do I know? Should I feel that it's more calm or like more light? That's the end of the purification, or still ongoing?
Yeah, I think as long as it has a grip, there's more work to do. If it's still there, if it hasn't dissolved, you know what I'm saying? There's more work to do to I always say to metabolize it. It's like I know you've been in a lot of the sessions that I do. We hold on to a lot of stuff. Sometimes we do it consciously, but a lot of it we do unconsciously. And we repress it and we hide it and and it's really hard, like, because it shows up in our dreams. It shows up in the way we treat ourselves. It shows up in the context that we live. So it's the act of birth, death, and rebirth never stops. So once I kind of was able to accept that in my own world, it became about, well, how do I become a master at moving through that cycle as smoothly as possible? How do I become a master at minimizing my stress when I go through this cycle of death and birth and rebirth over and over again?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. Do you have your screen of your contact information?
Yeah, let me, here we go. These are the modalities that I work with, and the depth piece works with a lot of that unconscious content. The yoga piece works with the nervous system so that we can manage our stress. And that's my contact info.
Perfect. Okay. So limitless-u.com. I like that. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you do want to get in touch with Lisa or work with her more on one-on-one, she does offer a discount for Access Elite members. So feel free to reach out to her at that contact information on the screen. And otherwise, we will be having another big series coming up with Lisa, all on exploring the inner addict. So stay tuned for more information on that, and you can find updated times and schedules on our mobile app or at accesselitenow.com. But thank you all for joining us, and I wish you all the best of luck in your self-care exploration. We'll see you soon.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thank you.